Comedian John Belushi died today at the age of 33 in the prime of a career which had already made him a part of American comic folklore. We'll focus tonight on his life, his death, and his remarkable talent. We'll talk with TV Guide critic Robert McKenzie, with comedian Milton Berle, and we'll have a commentary from contributing correspondent Bob Green.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. For most of his television career, at least, John Belushi careened at a breakneck pace between the irreverent and the outrageous. It was not only his comedy that was unpredictable, there was always a strong sense that the act was a reflection of the man, and the man a bizarre reflection of a generation. Now John Belushi is dead. Not perhaps a superstar of international range, but an especially talented member of an especially talented group that raised television satire to new heights. What they did, those not ready for primetime players, and what John Belushi did with a special zest bordering on vengeance, was to strike a loud and responsive note among millions of sympathetic but infinitely more inhibited viewers. He was 33 when he died this morning. Here's a report from Robin Groth.
The Chateau Marmont sits just above Sunset Boulevard in the Hollywood Hills. It is a landmark in this town, a hotel where many actors stay while in Los Angeles, and where some live. John Belushi was among the hotel's frequent visitors. He had checked into Bungalow 3 last Sunday, here to begin work on a movie for Paramount. And it was in the bungalow's master bedroom where Belushi was found dead just after noon today. Police say William Wallace, Belushi's physical trainer, came to Bungalow 3 when he couldn't get Belushi on the telephone this morning. Wallace was met by this man, Bruce Beckler, a hotel day security guard.
What happened is I got called up from the desk to find out what was going on up here at Bungalow 3, and I came up, and his friend was already here, and I said, well, we have to do something, and that's when we started to mouth-to-mouth and all on him. So when we did get to him, I could tell, that he'd been left alone a little bit too long, so he was already dead. He's just such a heavy man, and his heart evidently failed on him, is what I think.
This woman, identified only as a friend of the actor, was the last person to see Belushi alive. Police took her into custody for questioning. She told police that she woke Belushi around 8 this morning because of his loud snoring. She asked if he were all right. He said he was. Then she got him a glass of water, signed for room service, and around 9 left the bungalow in Belushi's Mercedes. When she returned at 2:30, she was met by police. After being questioned, she was released. But the big question still remains. How did John Belushi die?
Yes, it appears that John Belushi may have died by natural cause. We don't know yet. We won't know until the coroner conducts the autopsy.
It was early evening before the coroner's office removed Belushi's body from Bungalow 3. An autopsy is scheduled this weekend, and a coroner's report expected early next week. This is Robin Groth for Nightline in Los Angeles.
Although he was only 33 years old, John Belushi had already established himself as a major American comic actor. Nightline correspondent James Walker traces some of the highlights of his career.
And now, another episode of Samurai Delicatessen.
John Belushi was a genius at humor because he could say so much with so few words. As a samurai warrior, he spoke with grunts and threw his sword.
Can I have a sandwich, please?
Belushi spent years perfecting his comedy talent at Chicago's Second City nightclub, but it wasn't until NBC's Saturday Night Live that he became famous as a member of the Not Ready for Primetime Players. His skits were always unpredictable, a bit insane, like here when he appeared as the leader of a band of antenna-quivering killer bees.
I'm a king, baby, want you to be my queen. We're all together, we can make honey, baby, the world has never seen. Okay, let's buzz a while. A buzz, buzz. A buzz, buzz.
From his success on television, Belushi turned to the movies, where he starred in this spoof of college fraternity life in Animal House. Some people said the humor was objectionable, offensive. But at the box office, it was a smash hit, earning over $85 million.
Let's go right here.
Belushi also appeared in a movie called 1941, where he played the role of a crazy pilot during World War II. The movie was a flop. But in Blues Brothers, where he teamed with friend and fellow comedian Dan Aykroyd, he scored again, this time in a spoof of rhythm and blues.
Here we are, the Blues Brothers.
One, two, three, four.
Belushi's sardonic sense of humor, described by some people as post-60s, post-acid, anti-establishment, made him a cult hero.
Let us begin. Repeat after me. I would like to feed your fingertips to the Wolverines.
To the Wolverines.
Next.
By his success, he rewrote the rule book on leading men. You don't have to look like Cary Grant, said one critic. Belushi proves you can be a star and look like a slob. In Continental Divide, he proved he could do more than just make jokes. Belushi played the role of a newspaper columnist in this romantic comedy, in which he demonstrated an ability to act.
Here. This is for you. It's an eagle feather. It was a sign of strength and courage to the Indians. And a brave could only wear it after he proved himself in battle. Nice.
Gee, you know, Eddie, I was thinking, being walked home from school and stuff, I guess it's okay, because, you know, if I didn't, I get
Belushi
lost.
said of the characters he portrayed, my characters say it's okay to screw up. People don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be real smart. They don't have to follow rules. They can have fun. And fun was what John Belushi always had time for. Partying all night was a favorite event. A few years ago, one movie director said of him, if he doesn't burn himself out, his talent is unlimited. I'm James Walker for Nightline in New York.
We were having so much fun. I didn't know it was 1:30. I turned around to hell one more.
John Belushi first made it as a comedian in Chicago, and when we return, we'll have a commentary on the environment that produced him from contributing correspondent Bob Green. And we'll talk about Belushi's career with TV Guide critic Robert McKenzie. Joining us to discuss the comedy and the career of John Belushi is Robert McKenzie, television critic for TV Guide magazine and for station KTVU in Oakland, California, where he is now. Bob, we obviously think he was special. I think the question is, especially for those who may not have seen him, why?
Ted, I think to appreciate what Belushi meant, you almost had to be of the generation that grew up with him, or the generation that discovered him, the generation that he was a catalyst for. I think, every generation has its heroes, and every generation is in rebellion, sort of, and what they look for in their heroes is a kind of rebelliousness. And in the past, it would have been a Marlon Brando or a James Dean. But this generation feels different, and I think it is different. They're not political. They don't buy heroes, and they don't buy anti-heroes either. what they were ready for was some craziness, some wildness, some irreverence, and some fun, and I think that's what Belushi was.
One of the key ingredients, I would guess, about humor, though, is that it has a certain universality, that if you can understand the language, for example, you ought to be able to understand the humor. Was it universal humor?
I think so. Belushi was a wild man, in the tradition of great wild men, but he was also cool. He was a marvelous combination there. A man who could wear a Killer Bee outfit or dress up in a samurai suit and cut a salami in half, and yet be cool at the same time. I think what made him cool was that, well, for one thing, he wasn't pretty. I mean, he looked like a slob. And it's kind of the ultimate cool, I think, to look like a slob and yet be wonderful somehow. And I think if you were in that generation, you thought he was wonderful. Women, for instance, found Belushi sexy. I think partly because that you could see that maybe underneath all that sort of surface rowdiness, there was kind of a big pussycat there. But also because I think maybe his wildness was almost as real as it looked.
To what degree, Bob?
Well, you always got the feeling that Belushi could go a little farther than anyone else, that he pushed himself maybe out to the precipice more than others, took risks. I think he seemed to be a guy of, like a lot of vivid talents, a guy of enormous appetite, the kind of guy who could stay up later, eat more food, take more strange medicines, tell more jokes than anyone else. I think he was a large guy, a large talent.
Each of those people in the Not Ready for Primetime Players made it initially as part of an outrageous group. And I realized that Belushi went on to make movies, certainly Animal House and Blues Brothers made it big. Some of the others didn't make it quite so big. Would he have succeeded, do you think, as an individual, as someone outside that repertory group?
I think he would have. I think even in that group of wild men, he was a kind of a rebel. I think, again, if you almost have to be of that generation that feels him as one of their own to really appreciate what it meant. There was a young woman here, one of my colleagues, who heard that he died today, and her eyes filled with tears, and I said, how do you feel about it? And she said, I feel angry. And she couldn't explain really why she felt angry or who she was mad at, but I think I understood. I think when somebody talented dies, it's always an occasion for sadness, but when somebody young dies, somebody who dies full of talent, it almost calls for more than sadness, for something stronger, and what she felt was anger.
Do you have a sense that he was ready to engage in a new stage in his career? I mean, the television now seemed to be behind him. Even some of the crazy movies seemed to be behind him. He looked as though he was moving toward a slightly more serious acting career.
Like perhaps Woody Allen, a comedian who goes beyond comedy to what's essentially comedy with his tragedy. It's possible, yeah.
All right, you saw him in that capacity also. I guess, what was it? Continental Divide was the last movie that he made, and that was a semi-serious, kind of bittersweet movie. Good, bad, as an actor?
I think he was a good actor. I think he's a brilliant actor. I think he could have been more of an actor, serious and as well as funny. You know, talented people are the people who illuminate life for us, either in comedy or tragedy. And most of the really talented people can do it either way. And that's why when one of them goes, it's sort of like a little eclipse, like a shadow falls over the sun. You know, even if it's only for a moment, it's enough to be chilling for a moment and saddening.
Thank you, Robert McKenzie. Chicago has been a major training ground for American comic talent for many years, producing such stars as Mike Nichols and Elaine May, Alan Arkin, Shelley Berman, and then a new generation of talent that came to national prominence on Saturday Night Live. If there was one thing they all had in common, it was a sense of irreverence. And John Belushi was, as I suggested, very much one of that breed. We have a commentary from contributing correspondent Bob Green in Chicago.
Belushi probably would have laughed at this, the idea of a major television network devoting half an hour in a tribute to him. It would have somehow appealed to his sense of the outrageous, the idea of a Chicago street kid getting this kind of attention. Because that's what Belushi was. He was a kid from Chicago. Right now we're on Wells Street at a bar called The Exit, right across the street from the second city where Belushi first made his name. If you don't know anything about Chicago, the first thing you should know is that it's not like New York or Los Angeles. There are no star makers here, no agents looking for people to turn into celebrities. So the very fact that Belushi made it the way he did make it beat all the odds. It was said that the 70s were a time with no heroes. The 50s had Elvis Presley, the 60s had the Beatles, but the 70s were supposed to have nobody. That was wrong, though, in a way, because Belushi and the cast of Saturday Night Live, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, they became the Beatles of the 70s in terms of popularity, to a whole new generation who couldn't relate to a Bob Hope or a Milton Berle or a Sid Caesar. Here were people they could laugh with and understand. They were saying, it's our turn. With Belushi, the reaction from people was not idolatry. It was almost as if they liked him. They were his friends. He didn't quite trust that, though. He had a Chicago street kid's wariness. It was happening so fast. He had the #1 record album in the country. He had the #1 television show, at least with the people that counted with him. He had the #1 movie with Animal House. And yet he couldn't quite trust it. He couldn't quite believe how much people really did like him. When Belushi would come back to Chicago, he'd make a point of walking around downtown in cut-off blue jeans. He'd like the effect that caused. And yet when he was filming The Blues Brothers here, he filmed a scene at Chez Paul, an expensive, fancy French restaurant. Just the kind of place that Belushi, the street kid, would never be allowed in. He liked doing that. Yet there was a melancholy side to Belushi. I saw him once, and I stopped him. We were going to have an interview after his first movie came out. And he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, "You don't remember, do you?" I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "Back in the early 70s, you were writing a column, and I was in Second City, and I came up and said hello to you, and you didn't even answer back." I had no idea what he was talking about, but the memory had stayed with him all those years. There was a sad side to Belushi that remembered all the hurts and didn't let them go. Last year, Belushi appeared in a movie called Continental Divide. It was about a Chicago newspaper man, and Belushi didn't play a comic role. He played a tender, almost romantic part. The movie was a flop. It didn't do well at the box office. The critics didn't like it. The director of the movie said that Belushi was very depressed about it. It made him unhappy that his fans would not accept him as anything but the laughing Bluto character in Animal House or Saturday Night Live. But none of that matters anymore. John Belushi is dead tonight, and we're in Old Town, where he started, and he may have been his happiest. I just hope before he died, he knew how much we liked him. We sure did like him. This is Bob Green in Chicago.
When we return, we'll talk with one of the elder statesmen of American comedy, Milton Berle, about the kind of comedy that John Belushi represented. In the early days of television, comedy meant Milton Berle, the first TV comedy king. The format wasn't that much different from today's stand-up routines, sketches, and guest shots, but it was all done live. Years later, Milton Berle appeared as a guest on the show that brought live comedy back and also brought John Belushi to national prominence, Saturday Night Live. Milton Berle is with us now in our Los Angeles bureau. Milton, I don't think that the time will ever come again when any comedian will dominate television the way you did in the early years of live television in particular. But what do you think it was that made this man stand out at a time when there was so much more on television?
Well, I thought that John Belushi was a genius. I thought he could do anything. He could do madcap comedy. He was not very unpredictable. He was madly outrageous like I was in the 50s with the crazy costumes. He was a satirist. He could do anything. And the first time that I met him was on Saturday Night Live. I was the guest star a couple of years ago, a guest star. And I walked in, he said, "Hello, Pop." I don't know what that meant. And he came into my dressing room, sat in my dressing room, and they wanted him to rehearse. So he said, "Wait a minute, hold it. I want to speak to the boss," referring to me, I guess. Pardon me for extolling my virtues, but he sat in the dressing room and sat on the floor, kept eating and looking at me, and he was telling me things about my life in show business that I even forgot to remember. You remember. But he was dynamite. He could do anything.
Milton, let me just ask you something about that particular scene that you were talking about. One had the sense about John Belushi that he didn't have a great deal of respect for anything that spelled establishment. In comedy terms, you are establishment, and yet you're telling me that he was in effect sitting at your feet.
Well, that was very, very strange to me. Very strange to me that he was like admiring me, and I was delighted. But and working with him was a delight too. He had a certain looseness on the stage. If I may talk about John right now, he had a looseness on the stage that was just tremendous in front of a camera. You know, today, Ted, especially this era, the audience can tell if anyone is tight and, you know, perspiring and never relaxed. But he was always relaxed. As I look at John Belushi and go back, he was, I was listening to Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Green from Chicago, and saying that he wasn't a Milton Berle or a Bob Hope. But I had a feeling that he was a throwback to the comedy of 2 decades ago, like Lucille Ball or Jackie Gleason or Red Skelton. Where he learned it, I suppose, was at Second City, but he was so knowledgeable, and I became one of his biggest fans.
And yet, some of the other observations that have been made about him here this evening and at other times was that John Belushi somehow reflected this anti-establishment generation that grew up in the 1960s. You're telling me you think he would have made it at any time?
I really do. I don't particularly agree with Mr. Green that he only could make it these days. I believe what you just said, Ted, that he could have made it any time, because he was a funny guy. He could do anything. You know, you always felt relaxed on the stage with him. You know, when we did live shows, and you were talking about Saturday Night Live, and the first ones that I did were live, if you got into trouble, you'd have to get out of it because you couldn't do it over again. And when John Belushi got into trouble, even especially the show that I was on with him, he got out of it by making some physical movement, and he could have made it in those days.
But
That's your answer to that.
But he wasn't a stand-up comic, was he?
Oh, yes, he was. He was also, I saw him do stand-up comedy. He was very hilarious. He could talk. Above all, I think the change that he made into the motion pictures, I think he was a very great actor and could have been one of our great dramatic stars if he ever wanted to.
Milton, we've got about half a minute left. Do you think that people 20 years from now, 30 years from now, will remember John Belushi and his comedy?
Yes, Ted, I believe they will. I believe they will. And I, for one, I hope 20 or 30 years from now, will remember him as one of the greats, the geniuses. And he left us much too soon, and it's a shame.
All right, Milton Berle, thank you very much indeed. I'll be back in a moment. The guests on This Week with David Brinkley on Sunday will be Israeli Defense Minister Ariel Sharon and Zbigniew Brzezinski, National Security Advisor to President Carter. The topic, increased concern over the chances for a new Israeli incursion into Lebanon and the status of the Camp David agreements. That's This Week with David Brinkley, Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's our report for tonight. This is Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.